Hi, my name's Douglas Davey, and I am in my backyard, and I am talking about my new book. It's called Switch, and it's out in fall 2014. It's about a guy named Sheldon, or Shell, who is just coming to accept the fact that he's attracted to both girls and guys, and that his life is going to change from the way it has been. And at the start of the story, he is in complete denial of his bisexuality, and then as the story goes on, he comes to accept it. Uh, he actually comes out in a big way to his whole school, which you can imagine has some significant repercussions, particularly in the time period that the book is set, which is the late 1980s, which not coincidentally is the time that I was also in high school. So that meant I didn't have to do any research or anything like that. I just had to go and remember what the clothes looked like and look at my yearbook. Uh, so I've often wondered, what would happen if someone would have come out in a really big way when I was in high school. So it's kind of a what if situation. I also was thinking about that idea where you have where people talk about writing a letter either to themselves in the future or to themselves in the past, offering advice and things like that. So I was thinking about what would happen if I would have written a letter to myself at the time I was a teenager. And I know, knowing myself at the time, that even if I would have appeared in front of myself and said, "Hey, I'm you from the future, and I've got so much great advice for you on how to save yourself a lot of heartbreak and things like that," that I would have said, "Forget you, old man. Why's your haircut so dumb?" So yeah, it's just the way it was. So I'm going to read a little bit in a sec. It's about a third of the way into the story, or maybe a little less, and in it, Sheldon, his girlfriend Jen, and their friends Sarah and Dan are meeting up at this mall. It's kind of a rundown mall, and then they're going to go to a movie. Afterwards, Shell is going to come out to Jen, and he's feeling very nervous about it, but he's also excited because he hasn't told anyone, so this is the first person he's going to tell. And so he's nervous about that. He's kind of excited about that, and he's also feeling so much sort of mental stress and strain that just hanging out with his friends and doing the kinds of things they always used to do feels really great to him, and he's having a good time, even though there's some friction going on. And it reminds me a lot of when I was in high school and the kind of things we used to do, which were mostly like wandering around and mouthing off and getting kicked out of places. Uh, I hope you'll get a sense of Sheldon and his friends and the sort of time and place that they're living in their relationships, and it's kind of maybe the last really good day he's gonna have for a while. Oh, one more thing. Uh, when I was talking about writing a letter to yourself, so the way I was trying to capture that was that sort of idea of the story is that it's written after the fact by Shell, shortly after he went through all this stuff. So he wrote it all down, and then years later, when he was an adult, say my age, he is looking at what he's written and he's commenting on it in the form of footnotes. So some of them are just explanatory, technology differences, things like that, and some of them are comments. So sometimes he's kind of proud of himself at the time, and sometimes he's kind of embarrassed by himself. I don't really know how it's going to work as a read aloud. I'll just say footnote and then read the footnote and then come back to the rest. I left home early in my parents' car, picked Jen up from her house out in the country, and we hit the mall so we could get some snacks for the movie. Footnote. If movie theaters didn't charge prices that defied all theory of supply and demand, we wouldn't have to resort to sneaking our snacks in. End of footnote. The shopping center was old and run down, but it was right beside the theater, so we usually stopped there. Inside we met Sarah and Dan, and I begged them to go with me to my favorite place in the mall, this terrible old department store. Footnote. There used to be tons of these before the big box stores took over. End of footnote. It was full of decrepit mannequins, wildly out-of-date fashions, and brand names you'd never find anywhere else. The rear of the store, which was eerily lit by sad aquariums, was like a whole other world. I thought the place was cool in a weird kind of way, but no one else did. As we entered the store, we passed a young woman who worked at the checkout counter. Like all the employees, she wore a blue vest. A serious-looking guy in a red beret Footnote. Don't be fooled, berets were definitely not in fashion. End of footnote. Was leaning on the counter across from her, flipping through the LPs. Footnote. AKA long playing vinyl records from back in the day when music came in actual containers. End of footnote. I heard him say, "Your music selection is terrible." With obvious frustration, she said, "God, you have to say that every single time. I know how bad this place sucks." Jenny laughed and whispered, "Even the people who work here hate this store." Walking through the aisles with my friends, marveling at the odd and mysterious products, I felt better than I had in ages. No matter what, we were all together, and life was going to carry on. I could tell Jen about what I was going through, and she'd take it all in stride. Footnote. I felt very compelled to tell her, both because I needed to talk to someone, and because not telling her seemed dishonest. I had kissed someone else, after all. End of footnote. We passed a doe-eyed female mannequin that looked like it was decomposing. She was naked, and the surface of her skin was marred by chips and scrapes. Sarah said, "That's what Barbie would look like if she was a zombie." We all laughed and then wandered into the food aisle. My eyes fell on a colossal jar of what looked like hundreds of tiny eyeballs suspended in brackish water. I hoisted it up for all to see. "Check it out." "What is that?" Jenny asked, looking disgusted. 3 gallons of pickled onions," I replied, and held the jar out in her direction. "This store is awesome." Jen stuck out her tongue. "Gross. Who needs 3 gallons of pickled onions?" "Who needs any pickled onions?" Sarah replied. I was going to reply, "People who drink a lot of cocktails?" But Dan took the jar from me and put it back on the shelf. "Can we get out of here now?" "In a minute," I said, and headed to the back of the store. The place had, to our knowledge, the only working instant photo booth in town. From a distance, and in the spooky light of the fish tanks, you might be convinced that the photo booth was new, with a kind of retro chic. But once you got closer, you realized that it wasn't retro, it was actually just really, really old. I pleaded with Jenny to come in with me. "Come on, it'll be fun." "No, my hair looks stupid." "It looks fine, come on." I grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her toward the heavy vinyl curtain of the photo booth. "Ugh, fine, but then we're leaving. I hate it in here, it's depressing." "Deal," I said, and pulled aside the curtain to let her in. She stood hunched over in the corner while I sat down on the cracked red vinyl of the swivel stool. It was a little high, so I lifted my butt and gave the seat a twirl. Once it was low enough, I sat back down and pulled Jen across my lap. I had to twist my hips a bit in order to dig my money out of my pocket. The movement forced Jen against the wall, and she grunted in displeasure. "Why didn't you get your quarters out before you sat down?" she asked. Excuse me. The glass panel at the front of the booth doubled as a mirror. Jen leaned toward it, flicking her hair over her ears. She licked the tips of 2 fingers and then ran them over her eyebrows, working some secret female magic to make them look perfect. I looked into my palm to see what I managed to pull out of my pocket. 3 quarters, a few pennies, and lint. "Jenny," I said sweetly. "Yes," she replied, breaking the word into 2 syllables. "Do you have a quarter I could borrow?" "God," she said in slightly amused frustration. Footnote. It was pretty much her default tone of voice. End of footnote. "This is the very last time I'm coming with you. The very last time." She reached into her purse and dropped a quarter in my palm. "Thanks, Jenny." She was peeved, but I didn't care. It felt so great to be there with her, doing the kinds of things we'd always done. It was like nothing had changed. I slid the quarters into the slot one after another. When the last one fell home, the entire booth began to shimmy and shake like it was strapped to the belly of an airplane. Jen held out a hand to steady herself. "One day this thing is going to kill someone, and it better not be me." A moment later, the shivering faded and was replaced by a low-pitched thrumming from somewhere deep in the booth. A flashing light indicated that our first shot was about to begin. We tried to change positions at the last minute, but the camera went off before we were ready. Flash. "Crap," I said. "Can we have at least one nice picture?" Jen said. We leaned in toward each other and smiled at the darkened pane of glass that hid the camera. Flash. "Now a serious one," I suggested, and we did our best to look solemn. Flash. "Now romantic," I said, and leaned in to kiss her cheek. Flash. "Now I'm leaving," she said, and began to get up. I put my arm around her waist and pulled her back down to my lap. "You know, we are all alone in here." "Please," she said, rolling her eyes at our admittedly unromantic environment. "Fine." We exited the booth and waited outside the machine as it whirred and sputtered. Beside us, Sarah and Dan had stopped at a display of Viewmasters. Footnote. They were like little binoculars that you could look in and see pictures. Click. "Oh wow," Sarah said excitedly. "Did you ever have one of these?" Dan nodded. Sarah took a peek in the viewer, then brought it back down again. "It's too dark back here. We have my stepdad's. He gave them to us before he died." Footnote. Her dad took off, then her mom remarried, and then that guy died. It's pretty tragic. And a footnote. They were so old. We had this one with Charlie Brown and Snoopy. Jen said, "Oh, I love the Charlie Brown Christmas special." But didn't you always wonder, I asked, if Lucy hated Charlie Brown so much, why did she put him in charge of their play? Dan added, and how did the Christmas tree going from being a stick to being like all full and green and perfect? Jen just shook her head. Sarah said, maybe because Christmas is magic and it's just a stupid TV show. Anyway, the one we had wasn't a cartoon, it was all photos of puppets or something like that. We love them. Her voice became uncharacteristically soft. I wonder where they are. Bet my mom sold them. God, I hate her. She stared thoughtfully at the Viewmaster in her hands, like it held an important secret just for her. Behind us, a dramatic rise in pitch from the ancient photo booth let us know that it was about to give birth to our damp line of images. The machine made one final shake and the pictures emerged. I reached into the tiny slot and picked up the strip by its edge. I thought they all looked good, except for the first one, which was mostly a dark blur made by her jean jacket. I held them up for Jenny to examine. She looked at them distastefully, critiquing each one in turn. Horrible, not great, awful, awful. Take them, I said. You take them, I don't want them. Sarah came over to take a look, the Viewmaster still in her hand. Let me see. She examined the tiny gray images. Footnote. The photos were black and white, even though we did have color photography at the time. I am not that old. She pronounced her judgment. This one sucks. This one's cute. This one's okay. She looked at Jenny. You look bad in this one. Thanks a lot, Jen said, and slapped Sarah with the back of her hand. Sarah yelled out, ow, and held her arm where she'd been struck. God, I just meant you look better in the second one. But that's not what you said, Jenny replied. Movement caught my eye. I noticed the clerk with the blue vest appear nearby, glaring at us. I guess we were being kind of loud. Dan must have seen her too, because he said, ladies and... Dork, let's get out of here. Finally, Sarah said. She walked back to the display and tossed her Viewmaster carelessly on top. Hey, the clerk exclaimed, stomping toward us. You break that, you buy it. Whatever, Sarah said, looking down at the clerk's name tag. Barb. The clerk pointed to the entrance. Out. We marched toward the exit, trying not to laugh. When we made it back to the mall, Jen said, that's it, I am never going back in there. Fine, I replied. As my friends walked away, I carefully folded the strip of photos in half so that the still damp images wouldn't be touching each other. I placed them in my pocket, then hurried to catch up. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed that, and look forward to Switch in fall 2014.